We want to bring in Ashley Bell. He's Director of African American Engagement for the RNC. Ashley, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
You know, it's really moving. We're here at this site here in Longwood when the original verdict came out for Brown versus Board of Education. The public schools here in this community, this county, said, we're going to shut down the schools for 5 years. We're not going to even open them because we don't want to desegregate. Some people feel that America today is very polarized when it comes to the issue of race. How is the Trump campaign dealing with that to attract minority voters? Why should they vote for Trump?
Well, I can tell you directly to your point, that happened in many cities around this country. It's still today, children of color don't receive the right education because they live in the wrong neighborhoods. And what Donald Trump has done is speak directly to this issue and say to parents, if you live in places where your children aren't getting a good education, I would rather you make the decision on the school you go to instead of letting Hillary Clinton make that decision. School choice has been his #1 priority. He's talked about dedicating almost $20 billion to school choice so parents can have that flexibility. But we still have not come where we needed to go from Brown versus Board of Education. There's still so many children in bad neighborhoods who are their education is dictated by their zip code. And that shouldn't be the America we live in.
Hillary Clinton is doing so well, double digits. I mean, incredibly well when it comes to the minority vote. How does Donald Trump even compete with that at this point?
Well, let me tell you, the Democrats have a small margin of error. They have to get 95% or more to win. But I can tell you that Donald Trump's doing something differently than Mitt Romney did and John McCain. He's speaking directly to black voters where they live, where they worship. And I think we've seen gains from that. We started off with maybe 1% plus or minus 3. So that put us at -2. And now you're seeing polls where 5, 9. LA Times poll had us in the teens. We're making progress. And if we can get to 8, 9, 10% in places like Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania now becomes red.
Why do you feel you're making progress? What's the issue that's resonating with African Americans?
Telling the truth. I mean, people are so tired of hearing politicians come and sing the same old song. How many times can you live in an urban area and have a Democrat come in your church, come to where you work, and say the same thing and nothing ever changes? Hillary Clinton has been in office for 30 years and can't tell people one thing she's accomplished in 3 decades. So when you look at the things that she has been a part of, let's talk about the crime bill of the 90s. Many urban areas know what that did to the black community, and they want her to be honest about that effect and talk about what she's going to do to change it, and she's not doing that. Donald Trump is.
All right, Ashley, we're going to continue that discussion, but I want to bring in Bob Schieffer here into this discussion. Bob, let's talk a little bit about the vice presidential debate. Historically speaking, it's been almost 40 years since the very first one. You had Bob Dole and Walter Mondale back in 1976. And it's funny because we've been playing some of those clips, and it was a very different debate than the one that we see right now, where the candidates are so well prepped and they know they have talking points that they're ready to use. This was almost a debate of the Mad Men era, where we see Bob Dole leaning on the lectern. I almost imagine him with a cigarette and a glass of brandy as he debates Walter Mondale. What are your recollections?
Well, all of these vice presidential debates in their own way have been kind of fun. They've been kind of interesting. The other part is, in elections, people vote for the president. I think probably when you look back in it in our lifetime, the only election where the running mate made a difference was 1960, when Lyndon Johnson was Jack Kennedy's running mate, and he carried Texas. There's no question, and I'm from Texas, that Jack Kennedy would not have carried Texas had Lyndon Johnson not been on the ticket. And as a matter of fact, he also carried several other states, including Georgia, where he got I think he got Kennedy in 1960, the largest percentage of the vote he got was not in his own state of Massachusetts, but in Rhode Island. And the next one was Georgia.
Yeah.
And that was all where you're from. And that was all because of Richard Russell, the senator from Georgia, who was one of Lyndon Johnson's closest friends. So it made a big difference that year. Most years it really doesn't make a difference. So I think this is important. We'll get a full measure of both these men tonight. But in the end, and I think this year more than ever, this is between the two top people on the ticket, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Ashley, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I agree. But I think what's special about this for the Republican side is that Donald Trump hasn't been in office before. He's never had to appoint anybody to anything as with a government function. This is his first pick. This is someone who he's putting out there to say, look, this is my first major decision as a major party nominee. I'm putting on full display why I chose this particular person. And I think tonight you're going to see Governor Pence talk about his congressional record, his experience as a governor, and you're going to walk away saying Donald Trump picks people around him to know what they're doing. doing it and know what they're talking about.
Well,
that's big for him.
Let me ask you this. What role do you think the vice president would play in a Trump administration? Has there been any discussion between Trump and Mr. Pence about what his particular role would be?
Well, I think they have. I think you've seen that very publicly, that we've talked about Governor Pence being someone who can sit down and figure out, how do we get a Trump agenda through Congress? How do we get a Trump agenda? How do we get governors to buy into a Trump agenda? It's what happens when you have someone who's a complete outsider from Washington who doesn't have that experience. You need someone who can come in and help you figure out how to get through Washington, and that's what he's doing. That's what he brings to the ticket.
Do you think he would ever be an advisor to Trump? And I guess that would bring up the question.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone who could talk to Trump outside his family that he would listen to them?
Well, I tell you, his family had a lot to do with picking Governor Pence, so I think he's almost family now. So it's pretty.
Well, it does. Bob raises a good point. I mean, it was reported in the New York Times and other newspapers that Donald Trump, essentially, when he was making his decision or looking to make that decision for a vice presidential pick, essentially said, look, I'm going to make America great again. If you're the vice presidential candidate, your job is to do all the things that generally people think the president does. And so Hillary Clinton has said the pick of Tim Kaine is because she expects him, if anything should ever happen to her, that he'd be ready to be president of the United States. Sounds like what you're saying is that Mike Pence will be there to sort of push along the agenda, the Republican agenda, not necessarily the things that Donald Trump is saying on the campaign trail right now, the things that are important to the RNC and to the Republicans.
Well, I think first off, you have to make sure, above all, if something would happen to the president, this person needs to be ready to step in. And I think Governor Pence is extremely qualified, understanding D.C., but also understanding how to govern a state and deal with the real problems of everyday people. But at the same time, you want a partner. Well, this is the first time we've had a nominee that was from outside of D.C., who wasn't a D.C. person, wasn't a government person. So what's good is that Governor Pence gives us an opportunity to say, look, here's the ideas that you have. Let's talk about how we get them through Congress. I know where the traps are. I know we can go to get things done. I know how to build coalitions. And that's where Governor Pence is going to prove vital.
How does he reconcile the fact that when you talk about Muslims and immigration, Trump wanted a complete ban on Muslims entering the country? Pence thought that was a little bit nutty. And then his opinion now kind of reconciled a bit with Trump. So when he goes to debate the issues today, abortion, for instance, he's more hardcore on abortion than Donald Trump is. How does he reconcile these differences? Because there are some significant differences between them.
Well, I think every vice president has those challenges. I think the same thing that Governor Kaine is going to have with Hillary Clinton. You don't find a clone and say, give me my clone and I want that to be my VP. It just doesn't work that way. But I will say that the differences that you have, they talk about them. And with your example with the ban on Muslims, that exactly has changed. And now we're in a position where we're being very targeted about who needs higher scrutiny before they enter this country. And that's something probably that advisors and people like Governor Pence had an impression on Donald Trump.
Does that help the fact before 9/11 there were significantly more Muslims who would vote the Republican Party than there is today? After 9/11, you can see a lot of them transferred over to the Democratic Party. How do you win over those people when your candidate is making those kinds of comments?
Well, look, we want the vote of every American. I think Donald Trump...
But I'm asking about the Muslim population in particular who felt that he's isolated them.
Well, I think he's been very specific that this country needs to make sure that who's coming in this country, we need to vet them as best we can. Not a religious test, but if you come from a country where we need to have more scrutiny, then we should. Because right now our country's failed us on so many occasions of allowing people in this country who shouldn't be here.
Bob, again, you mentioned, interestingly enough, how powerful LBJ was, not only as a vice president, but eventually he became president of the United States as well. This debate, even though we know that generally people are picking the president of the United States, because this has been such a topsy-turvy election season, might we be seeing something a little different? Might this debate be unlike any of the others, perhaps going back to 1960?
You know what? The safest bet on the card is this one. This will be a more substantive debate than what we saw last week. I would think that's the safest bet.
These men are experienced debaters.
But I tell you what I think is going to be interesting. The role of the vice president in these debates is not, number one, not to make a mistake.
Do no harm.
Do no harm.
Do no harm.
The second responsibility, I think, is to explain who their running mate is and give people a good reason to vote for them. I'm wondering, though, if this debate may turn out to be something like, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tim Kaine go after Donald Trump at the get-go, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Mike Pence try to turn it back to Hillary Clinton. We may have a debate here where we hear more about Hillary Clinton from Mike Pence and more about Donald Trump
from Tim Kaine.
From Tim Kaine.
Because he will be able, Ashley, to go after Donald Trump cane will very quickly because of some of the things that has happened just in the last week or so with the Alicia Machado, with the tax returns, with the comment that came out of nowhere that perhaps Hillary Clinton is not faithful to her husband. These are things, I'm not saying it gives him the advantage. It just means that these are sort of the things that are fresh in people's minds right now that he's going to, and what I think is going to happen is he's going to force Mike Pence to have to defend Donald Trump and these accusations and not really talk about the things that are important to Americans like TPP, like trade, like NAFTA.
Well, we would love to have a debate on policy, and if Governor Kane goes there, I'm prepared to say that Governor Pence will respond. There's lots to discuss amongst two men that have a good record when it comes to policy. They have lots of experience. But if he goes there, you can expect Governor Pence to respond. There's lots of issues that Americans care about, and if Governor Kane goes there, you can expect Governor Pence to respond.
Bob, what are you looking for tonight?
I want to see how well they promote the guy that is at the top of the ticket. I want to hear Mike Pence make an argument for Donald Trump. This is why Donald Trump would be the best president. I think you will also hear, and I would like to hear Tim Kaine say the same thing about the person that he is running with. I just hope we can kind of turn down the volume from what we had last time out, which I thought the whole thing was kind of an embarrassment and beneath the dignity of the office that both of these people are seeking. And I think we can do better than what we did last week, and I hope we do.
I learned something new about Bob Schieffer that I never knew before. He always wears his purple.
Yeah.
For
TCU.
It's all about his TCU, and apparently always wears purple socks. We're going to Instagram that on our Instagram account, and we're going to have to do a story to explain why he wears his purple socks on Instagram.
Exactly. Ashley Bell, thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you.
Bob Schieffer, always great to have you for a discussion.
Appreciate it.
See you, Bob. You too.